Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Jeff Gedman with American Purpose. We're starting and we have others still to join, and they will be with us without a doubt in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes. But for you and for our guest of honor, let's begin. So this is a pleasure and a privilege and honor, Congresswoman Jane Harman. It's great to see you, Jane Harman. You have a new book out titled Insanity Defense: Why Our Failure to Confront Hard National Security Problems Makes Us Less Safe. Everybody in this participant intensive roundtable knows who you are and values you greatly. You've served in Congress for a good number of years and performed as legislator, but also a key voice in America's national security debate. You've traveled the world, you've been involved in the Munich Security Conference and many other important places and agenda-shaping venues. For 10 years, you served as president and CEO of the Wilson Center in Washington, I think the first female president. And we have this book in hand that I've read with pleasure, and good heavens, so many threads to tug on. And you and I agreed that I would start by asking you about the book and portions, and then we'd open it up to the gallery in this participant intensive roundtable and invite questions. So Jane Harman, welcome. And Jane, it's great to see you.
Thank you, Jeff. And I was thinking that we met, I think in the Czech Republic, I'm not sure where we met, but around the world someplace. And let me salute your service for a better public policy and more informed citizenry and better world. Not easy to achieve any of that.
So thank you, that's kind, and what a memory. We met in Prague, absolutely right, at RFERL at the headquarters. So here we go. Jane, if I may, let me start in the back of the book with the chapter titled The Incredible Shrinking Congress. And there are a number of aspects to this and in your writing, but let me start with one. You do note that we've always had partisan acrimony, and we had with Thomas Jefferson a threat of a second revolution, overpaying war reparations taxes. All the business of slavery and segregation played itself on Capitol Hill. You also note that there are times of armed duels, good heavens. But you're right, Jane, that in modern time, in any case, things have changed, not for the better. And we have now, as you put it, a different business model. You note that in past, there was lots of fighting in public, but when the doors closed, there was mostly rolling up the shirt sleeves and getting things done through hard work and compromise. And in your view, that's changed or changing. Can you talk to us a little bit about Congress, how people are working today, and what you describe as the new and changed business model?
Well, thank you for reading my book so carefully. I'm not sure I need to say anything. I'll just let you ask me very informed questions and I'll say, yes, yes. But seriously, I've been around a bit. I'm 200 years old, and I started working in Congress in the 70s first as a legislative aide, and then a legislative director, and then chief counsel of a Senate Judiciary Committee subcommittee. Back in the day when we had a bunch of segregationists in Congress. I'm straining to think if we had any women in the Senate, but at any rate, if we had any, it might have been one, but we had an environment where people would disagree all day, that's right, and then drink heavily all night and try to resolve problems. And one of the things I was responsible for in my job as chief counsel to the Constitutional Rights Subcommittee was extending and expanding the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This has been in the news because the Supreme Court has invalidated many of the things that we did back in the day. And a couple of things stand out. Number one, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee was a guy named Jim Eastland from Mississippi, an avowed segregationist who would never have supported what we did. And in these days, the thing wouldn't even have been reported from committee, but it was a kind of wink, wink, nod thing. And somehow our subcommittee bill, which was supported by a number of Republicans too. It was bipartisan because, you know, when you think of the old crowd, Ed Brooke, first African-American Republican senator, I think, Jack Javits, who's renowned from New York. Anyway, they were all pro-civil rights. So we had support in our subcommittee. I can't remember exactly who was on it. And Eastland let it go directly to the floor, didn't block it. And on the floor of the Senate, he, of course, opposed it. But the point is the bill passed, and it was an important bill for the day. And I can't even imagine in these days of, you know, let's default on our debt and let's, you know, blow the place up, that anything like that could happen. So that that's kind of one observation of back in the day. The second thing is, I remember, because I was there, I wasn't involved in it, the Richard Nixon impeachment. And he was impeached by a bipartisan committee vote in the House. Impeachment is a House-driven function, then conviction is a Senate-driven function. And for, you know, I remember that a group of the elders in the Senate leaders, all male, of course, went to see him and said, you're going to be convicted, you need to resign. And guess what happened? He resigned. So there was a basic respect for the machinery of government, which it didn't take January 6th to teach us, isn't there anymore. And I despair because Congress is the Article 1 branch of government. The executive branch is Article 2, the judiciary is 3, and the laws and basic oversight of our government are supposed to be passed and happen in Congress. And whoa, it shrinking, maybe I should say the incredible disappeared Congress based on current performance.
So thank you. And then let me ask as a follow-on to that, you talk in the book about friendships and how important they were in friendship, but also in politics. Now, we don't want to go and say that there are no friendships today on Capitol Hill. That's a bridge too far and not true. But you do emphasize that, Jane, in the book. You talk about Susan Collins, for example, but both on a personal and professional basis, and how constructive relationships like that are. Could you say something a little bit about that, please?
Well, I make 2 points. I make one point that you can't get anything done without friendship. I mean, the Congress is a human enterprise. And I'm not saying other enterprises aren't human, but forget about it if you don't know and understand other people and where they're coming from. But I also make a point that women do this better than men, at least at the moment in Congress. The women's caucuses in both the House and the Senate are truly bipartisan. And I know the women senators have dinner, I think it's once a month, and know each other pretty well, which is a very good thing, and legislate together because they know each other. It's pretty hard to demonize somebody you know well. It's really easy to do it if you don't know them. So Susan Collins and I bonded over intelligence reform. After 2 massive intelligence failures, both of which I was present to view. One was 9/11, and the other one was the report, the wrong report of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Congress decided, or some of us decided, to reform the way we have organized our intelligence community in the way we write national intelligence estimates. And the law doing that and creating the Director of National Intelligence passed in 2004. And Susan and I were 2 of the so-called Big 4 conferees on that law. The other 2 were a guy named Pete Huckstra of Michigan, who was chairman of the House Intel Committee. I was ranking member, and the other person was Joe Lieberman, who was then a ranking member on Senate Homeland Security. Susan was the chair. And so, of course, I say we were the 2 women, and so therefore we did 98% of the work. But seriously, we did a lot of work. We became very good friends. We see each other all the time, which doesn't mean we agree all the time, but that friendship is just bedrock in terms of my ability to do things when I was in the House, and our ability to reason and talk together and be with each other now. And, you know, just one aside, a former woman senator, Kay Bailey Hutchison, also became a good friend during that time. Another Republican, she served on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and we worked a lot on defense matters. Kay was here last, and then she became ambassador to NATO in the Trump administration. Kay was here last week, and three of us had dinner together. We are still friends, good friends, and so I think that a giant problem now is that people refuse to deal with each other. That blaming each other is the operational the operational rule in Congress. If you blame the other side, you get more political points than if you work with the other side, because then you're bipartisan, and then someone will run against you in your primary, and oh dear, you might lose. So who really loses, or what really loses? The country.
So thank you, Jane. At some point, I'll ask someone if they have it handy, perhaps at the end, to hold up a copy of the book. In this day and age, I bought it and I've read it. It's the Kindle version on my iPad, but read the book, and we'll show it too before the program is done. Also, the book is it's serious about policy and public policy, but it also has endearing parts. And I remember now, as you speak, Jane, the anecdote that you recount where you and Susan Collins, after a long, long day on the Hill, decide to go for a nightcap. And better you tell that story than I. Would you relate that?
Well, a lot of the work we did among the big four was at night, and we were in Dennis Hastert's office. He was then the Speaker of the House in the Capitol when we did this work. It was just a convenient meeting place. I don't know why else we did it there, but our meeting ended fairly late, and Susan and I decided, for whatever reason, that we would go, yes, have a nightcap at a nearby restaurant called Bistro Bis. And we went there, and we were drinking a glass of wine, and all of a sudden the waiter brought over 2 more glasses of wine. What? From where? Some guy at the bar. And I got a little squeamish and thought, oh, who is that? And asked the waiter to ask who he was. And the word came back that he had just seen us chatting with each other. He assumed we were sisters, and he thought that was worth celebrating. And isn't that lovely? It's just lovely.
It's really lovely and important. So let me move on and ask you about you and your political philosophy and your compass. And if not verbatim in the book, it comes through that you are a, how do I want to say it, my language, defense hawk, or tough on defense, but a social liberal. First, amend that if you wish, but tell us a little bit in a time where politics is so fluid and so dynamic and changing. Where do you belong today? How do you see yourself?
I think I belong in a zoo in the dinosaur collection. I just think there are very few people left with political viability. And remember, I left Congress on my own feet to succeed Lee Hamilton at the Wilson Center in the middle of my 9th term. So I didn't stand for election again, but I won all my congressional races. That's not the point. But I think it is much harder to have the views that I have today than it was back in the day. I fit the mold of somebody probably most people on this Zoom call have never heard of. His name was Scoop Jackson from Washington State. He was also called Mr. Boeing, but he was a Democrat who was pro-defense, which I was, and my district made most of our intelligence satellites. So, it was the economic center of my district, to make a point. But I also had some background in defense when I was elected. I don't think I would have been elected without that. But Scoop Jackson was pro-defense, pro-business, I think pro-trade, and progressive. And by progressive, I mean, now we have all these micro labels, so I don't know, I don't know if that word really characterizes it, but I am sympathetic to some of the social, very sympathetic, very supportive of many of the social issues we've confronted in recent years. And all of that's in one little package here. Here it is. And I think that those views fit my bipartisan district. I ran in a district that was a lean Republican district, meaning that more Republicans voted than Democrats. I had a lot of Republican support. Over time, it was redistricted to be a safe Democratic seat. That's when I started getting opposed from the left. But I think most of the voters sort of got my politics, and I still have the same politics.
Thank you. Let's move to foreign policy for a moment. You write in the book about Iraq, you write in the book about Afghanistan, and if we could focus on the moment, Jane, in the case of Afghanistan, I would love to hear you on three things. The policy of withdrawal, right or wrong, the execution of the withdrawal. There's a growing consensus that it was not well done, but there's another group that says, you don't know how hard this is. It was the best the market could bear. And then three, the ongoing conversation, and this is one of your bailiwicks, about intelligence and counterterrorism. So I exaggerate for effect, but you have Tony Blinken, Secretary Blinken on one hand saying, we got it covered by satellites and drone in Afghanistan. And on the other side, H.R. McMaster saying, you need folks on the ground to get this done properly. Could you dig into any of that for us, please?
Sure. Well, let me start with the last part so I don't forget what's happening right now. There's a big story, I think it's in the Washington Post today, it's been online, about some of our intelligence assets getting compromised or killed. And the intelligence community, I think the CIA specifically, because that's the spy agency, others are more technical, like the National Security Agency, are sending out bulletins to try to manage the situation better and protect people who are trying to help the United States. And I worry a lot about that. And so even if, we're going to get to should we have left and how did we leave, but even if we were still there in the capacity we were last year, I wonder how good and whether we would have had the intelligence assets that we need pick a place in Afghanistan because of what seems to be happening. Why are these people getting compromised? Well, technology is evolving and bad guys are very agile. I could talk about that for 100 hours about I wouldn't talk publicly about a lot of it, but I just say they have evolved. And we have all kinds of processes and bureaucracies, and they don't. And we have scruples, and they don't. So, I mean, there are just ways that, regardless of whether we still had a bigger footprint there, we might have been hobbled. So, okay, I said that about that. In terms of the policy and the execution of withdrawal, my basic point, and it's in the book, is after we were attacked on 9/11, we should not have been surprised. I was one of 3 big studies that predicted a major attack on US soil, but after we were attacked and surprised, we did something right. Let me just be positive here. Everybody understood America was attacked. It wasn't, oh, the Republicans did this to the Democrats, oh, the Democrats did this to the Republicans. We rallied as a country. We showed resilience, and Congress passed very quickly an authorization to use military force, so-called AUMF, against those who attacked us, who were mostly harbored in Afghanistan. And our military achieved the mission pretty quickly, degraded the capacity of al-Qaeda to attack us again. And if anybody missed that movie, 10 years later, we took out the leader of al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, in Pakistan. But at any rate, we accomplished the mission. What went wrong then was we stayed without a clear strategy to explain why we were staying, what we wanted to accomplish, and how to accomplish it. And so, again, looking at this from that vantage point, we probably should have done what George Bush 41 did after he got the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and say our mission's accomplished, and I'm not taking it further. Or at least let's debate a strategy around why we would take it further. So we took it further. We over-militarized what came next, I believe, and the story is the story. And by the time we got to this summer, Joe Biden, who had been skeptical of this forever, was just sick of military briefings that said, oh, if we only stay a few more days, a few more weeks, it's going to be different. Insanity defense, doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So I think the policy to leave was correct. He also, I'll say this, was building on a Trump policy, which had negotiated a departure date without negotiating with the Afghan government, thereby seriously undercutting the Afghan government. But I'm not blaming Trump. Biden makes this decision. I think then, hindsight's always better, but there were a series of things that should have happened earlier and faster, and I don't see how we can deny that. And the military testified last week, and I thought the testimony was very honest. And so I think our withdrawal was messy. I think it always would have been somewhat messy, but I think if we had put some things in place earlier, and certainly the closure of Bagram and leaving the weapons there. I now read today that our rifles are for sale in Afghanistan. Were things that I hope we're going to do lessons learned. We have to do lessons learned to do better if there's ever such a circumstance. I just make one more comment about Afghanistan now. So I read, again, I don't have any of the classified briefings. The country is nearly bankrupt. The independent universities are closed. The Taliban is barring women from many roles, not every role that they have. But the way forward is going to be tricky, and I think it is imperative that with the international community, we focus on Afghanistan in terms of our soft power, our diplomacy, our aid, and our ability through international organizations to try to fight for human rights and certainly women's rights. And is it going to be hard to do? Yes. Do I think it's a good result that the Taliban is in control? Absolutely not. But I guess I'm a realist, and I see where we are, and I understand how we got there. And I did support and do support the decision to end the military mission, but it is going to be hard.
So Jane, thank you. I want to follow on. I'll ask one and maybe two more, and then I'm going to open it up to the colleagues in the gallery. Can you stay with this over-militarization or the non-military assets and capabilities? Because you talk about that in the book, and not just in reference to Afghanistan. Tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that. If we need less of one and more of the other, what does that look like? What are the best instruments at our disposal? I understand particulars of circumstance and country matter, but tell us a little bit about priorities and resources in the soft power realm.
Well, it was Joe Nye of Harvard who coined the term soft power and the term hard power. I remember, and he gives me credit for this, saying, hey, Joe, what about smart power? And he said, yes, smart power. And smart power to me is understanding the mix of soft and hard power. Most people would say, certainly I would, and I bet you would, Jeff, since you were in a soft power enterprise yourself, that we should use hard power only when soft power doesn't work. And hard power, having the stick, helps soft power work. But starting with a stick usually doesn't get us where we need to go. I mean, terrorism is not an enemy, it's a tactic. And it's based on, my view, a bad idea, a corrupt idea, sometimes connected to the Muslim religion, sometimes not connected to it. And how do you defeat a bad idea? You can't kill your way out of a bad idea. You have to have a better idea. And the idea of America, at least as conceived by our founders and over the years, is a great idea. So showcasing our strengths, not just our constitutional documents, but our generosity and our capability and our the enormous welcome mat that this country has had over the years for immigrant families like mine is a way, my view, better way to defeat the bad guys. So I start with that. I think we shortchanged soft power totally after 9/11. And I don't just blame George Bush 43. I think people thought we would be attacked again. I'm one of those people. And I think that some of the decisions we made were very poor and set a very bad example. And then we didn't really change course under the Obama administration or the Trump administration, even though Obama said, Obama ran for office saying he would have been against the Iraq war. He wasn't in Congress to vote on it. But we didn't end the so-called endless wars under his administration, or obviously under the Trump administration. So I would say we shortchanged soft power for years. I think Biden is right to try to surge soft power, to restore the State Department, to put more resources against our diplomatic skills. I don't think we've done that perfectly. Don't hear me say that, but I think, and to reconnect to our allies. So I think that's the right course. And I think that, we have to fund a smart Pentagon. We have to make sure that we are able to secure our country. But again, I would argue that putting our soft power foot first is the better approach to that.
So Jane, I have one more. We did promise everybody this participant intensive roundtable. If you all want to get ready, you can put your question in chat, or you can press the raised hand function as you think about questions you want to pose to Congresswoman Harman. One last my side for now. You talk about in the book, principally in reference to Iraq, the use, the misuse, the abuse of intelligence. I want to ask you this. Jane, as a legislator, a former member of Congress, how do you talk to voters and constituents about how intelligence works? Because I think often there's this idea, it's this exact science. Is this the case or is this not the case? And it's more complicated, and you were on the inside of so much of this. How do you talk to educated citizens who need to know more about how intelligence works?
Well, not a lot, actually, is the answer to that. A lot of what I knew, I learned in classified settings, so you can't talk about that at all. And you really have to go dark about that. But what I said in the book is that intelligence is not a science. It's a set of predictions about the intentions and capabilities of others. Some of them are our enemies. Some of them are our friends. I mean, if you're going into a diplomatic negotiation with Angela Merkel, we actually overstepped there. I'll explain in a second. You want to kind of know where she's coming from in terms of, let's imagine a trade agreement with Germany or whatever. We ended up wiretapping her cell phone, which created a gigantic kerfluffle back in the day about, I guess, in the Obama administration. So it must have been, I don't know, 12 or 13 years ago. My friend John Emerson had just arrived as the new ambassador from the US to Germany, and boy, did he get it in there. But the point is, capabilities and intentions. You have to really understand that to deal with other people. And our intelligence community has been designed for that purpose. Does it do it perfectly? No. Does it overstep some of the time? Yes. And how do you explain that to people? Well, again, you can't talk about the successes. How can you say we prevented the attack on X? I guess you could say we prevented attacks, but you really can't say what X is. I mean, one that was in the news, which we did prevent, so I can talk about it, was I think the UAE tipped us off to the fact that there were explosive elements in the cartridges of some printers that were being put on an airplane to fly to the US. The point being that the printers in the cargo hold would blow up and the plane would go down. And we were able to intercept that. So that's a success. And it was in the press. So that's the only reason I'm telling you that. Very hard to do this. I mean, the advantage I had, and a reason I served on Intel, in addition to being very interested, was that my district, as I said, made many of our intelligence satellites. And so I did get to see this stuff, which is, an amazing technological feat. I did understand back in the day what these things could do. And I did get briefed on, the details of our intelligence budget and have a very senior role on the Intelligence Committee. So I was proud of that. And those constituents who were in that realm did understand, and I could talk to them. But the others, some of them, thought I was a traitor and spy because they didn't understand and didn't appreciate and don't. Some still don't, why we need to do this kind of work.
Thank you, Jane. Now there's questions that will stay in the chat to everybody. Feel free to read and interact that way. Otherwise, the floor is open. And Michelle, as you know, sometimes I overlook hands raised on my screen. If you have someone, tell me, Michelle, otherwise I'm going to continue.
I don't have any hands raised, but there was
there's one in chat.
Yeah.
I do realize you all, this is a book conversation about a book that I've had the privilege of reading, and some of you perhaps not yet. So don't feel like the conversations have to be bound to the book. They can be attached to the book, but not necessarily. Jane, can I ask you, at one moment you mentioned something about allies and alliances, and I know that's important to you and your career. It's been a mainstay. And it seems to me we are in choppy waters for different reasons. I would love to hear your assessment of the Trump administration and its managing of our alliances. And then, of course, Biden was said in some quarters to be a pair of sure hands and more predictable and stable, but a couple things have thrown allies for a loop his first months in office. Can you tell us where you think we stand with our allies, I'm going to say in Europe and in East Asia, and what's to be done?
In 2 minutes or less. I think the world, the so-called liberal world order, that's not a political party selection. It's a description of America's role since World War II, is very frayed. The conception at the time was that we would make sure that our enemies, specifically Japan and Germany, did not rebuild war arsenals, but we would also not humiliate them. We would protect them if they didn't do it, and we would do programs in Europe in particular to, like the Marshall Plan, to build a stronger economy in Europe so we wouldn't go back to the set of behaviors that generated Adolf Hitler after World War I. It was a really good idea. And so that sadly hasn't worked as well as perhaps it could. The European Union is a collection of some strong countries and some weaker countries, and held together with rubber bands and Scotch tape. And hopefully it will again be the stronger conception that was imagined. But anyway, Europe has some issues even without our being somewhat estranged from Europe. But Donald Trump made it very clear that he didn't see that much value in NATO, the collective defense alliance, which came to our defense, invoked Article 5, the common defense provision after 9/11. First and last time it's ever done that. He didn't see much use in that. He wanted all the countries to pay a certain amount of dues. I'm not against the dues, but it was just more of the approach, I think, was not appreciated. And then you asked about Asia too. Asia is a huge trading market for the US and a huge trading market for China. And over the years, nobody should have missed China's rise. And China's now on our top list of threats. And the idea that Obama had was to create a trading regime in Asia, the Trade Promotion Protection, TPP, I think that's what it stands for. No, trade. Well, anyway, you'll tell me, Jeff, because you're smart. TPP, which would have used the states in Asia as a buffer against China, economic buffer. Trump pulled out of that. We're still out of that. And I think we lost a lot for throwing that overboard. It was never ratified in the US, but I would have hoped it would be. And I strongly support it. At any rate, where are we now? Biden has pledged to restore the ties with Europe. In some ways that's happened. He strongly supports NATO. He was a regular at the Munich Security Conference, which I've attended 21 times, and very well known in Europe. Tony Blinken grew up in France, et cetera, et cetera. But there have been a few things that have not gone so well. We just talked about Afghanistan. A number of the NATO countries say they were not fully informed. The Biden administration disputes that. But then this recent so-called sub-snub, the AUKUS deal, the Australia, UK, US deal for nuclear subs, got France riled up. Again, it's disputed how well briefed France was. Tony Blinken has been there this week, meeting with all the right folks. Hopefully that'll pass, hopefully. France has had a really important role in the Indo-Pacific, and hope it will continue to play that. And I also think that most people think that the Australia deal has a lot of validity to it. But at any rate, I think there were a few things that didn't go as well as they might have. I think it's very important to stress our soft power ties with our allies in Europe and Asia and elsewhere. And it's the alliances that will, to my mind, make us a much more important player in the world in the right way. So that's a big part of our soft power.
So thank you for that round. Thank you, Jane. Let's turn to Mike Fox, and then after Mike, Shirley will come to you. But Mike, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Congresswoman, again for your time. My name is Mike Fox. I work for the State Department, and I'm co-chair of the American Purpose Circle of Friends. My question, as per our conversation before the larger chat began, pertains to Africa. How would you recommend we pursue a smart power pathway forward with Africa to build partnerships, though, that are based on respect, while also accounting for the fact that the Chinese government is coming in with, let's say, preying on past vulnerabilities of governments, such as corruption there? How do we thread this needle and aggressively build these relations? Thank you.
Well, first of all, Mike, you told me that you're headed to Africa as part of, as your first foreign service, foreign post. That's a good start. We need our best and brightest to go to Africa. There are 54 countries in Africa, and the population of Africa, I think, is going to double in the next 20-ish years. And we would be totally nuts to ignore Africa and the potential for helping with Africa's development, or ignoring it. And then, as you point out, the Chinese and others will be there, and we have made our future much harder. So, I'm bullish on doing that. The Bush administration, Bush 43, actually, with these Millennium, the Millennium Challenge program, made some real inroads into Africa and did a very good thing. And that's still highly regarded. But we haven't, I don't think the Trump administration did it, and I haven't seen it yet in the Biden administration, made all the investments we should be making to help Africa combat two huge challenges. One is climate, gigantic challenge, which has created thousands, tens of thousands of climate refugees. And the other is terrorism, especially in North Africa, where all the bad guys like ISIS and have roots. And there is a number of failed states. There is the Sahel, and these regions need our attention and our help. So I'm glad you asked that. I was just, Jeff had asked me about Europe and Asia, but we have to have our alliances in Africa too. We definitely do.
Thanks so much.
So I thank you, Mike and Jane. I feel obligated to say, and if you would put it into chat, Michelle, that we host next week a terrific young researcher at AEI, Emily Estelle, who looks exactly these issues in Africa. More about that in due course. Shirley, let's go to you, and then we'll go to Frank. Shirley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jeff. Congresswoman Harman, thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to reading your book. I'm a Truman Fellow, Mandarin speaker, and have over a decade of experience in the domestic politics and foreign affairs of China and Taiwan. And speaking on Africa, my parents are from Ghana, so that China-Africa piece, it's always so intriguing to me. So I've been fortunate to have, to your point, that story in your book that you and Jeff brought up, I've been very fortunate to have male mentors who have also encouraged me to ensure that I connect with the strong community of professional women in DC. So I again, very, very much looking forward to reading your book. My question, so there are folks that argue that yes, we need to protect our national security when it comes to China, but also wisely address the economic front. And we recently heard from Representative Tai on that. Do you feel there is a true way to do that, to walk and chew gum at the same time? We can say we have to protect ourselves first, or do we just need to be addressing both?
I think we need to be addressing both. I have been lucky enough to spend a lot of time with Henry Kissinger, after whom the China program at the Wilson Center is named. It's the Kissinger Institute for China and the US. And he always pointed out that the name of China comes first, because the idea of it was to help Americans understand China, not demonize China, understand China. And Kissinger played this seminal role in opening up China with Richard Nixon in the 70s. And, I would argue that we never fully understood that China didn't want to be us. I mean, one of the things I say in my book is that after the Cold War ended, we were the sole superpower. We won, everybody else lost. And we missed two things in the 90s in the Clinton administration. One was the rise of terrorism, which we didn't understand. And, we just talked about that. And the other was the rise of China. And China has a very different economic model and worldview. Well, okay. What Henry Kissinger says now is, and he's only 98 and his mind is very sharp, is we have to confront China. It's your question. He would agree with you. We have to confront China where China is wrong and where China endangers our security. We also have to cooperate with China where we must, in ways like climate and trade. I mean, I think fair trade, where they're not stealing our intellectual property or taking advantage of us in some way, it is mutually beneficial. And if people are doing business together, they're probably not making war together or making war against each other. And so I think, and I think the Biden administration is trying to do this. Yes. It's a perfect no. And I think that the USTR's, the US Trade Representative's statements the other day about continued sanctions are viewed by many as disappointing. I would hope we'd have more of an economic policy than just sanctions. I'm not saying sanctions are bad, but I don't think that's a total economic policy. But I think that Biden is trying. He will send a very capable person to be our ambassador, a very good friend of mine named Nick Burns, who has been ambassador all over the world, including to NATO, and was Undersecretary of State for Policy. And I see the potential there to have a nuanced and improved strategy with respect to China.
Right.
Thanks, Shirley, and thank you, Jane. Frank, thank you for making time today, and you have the floor.
So, Congresswoman Harman, thanks very much for speaking to us, and thanks for your support of American Purpose. It's been very important to our little enterprise here, so I appreciate that very much. So this is going to be the third China question in a row, but it does seem to me that there's this big 800-pound gorilla in the room. As far as I can see, I do not see how China is not going to try to forcibly reincorporate Taiwan, and it's going to do it sooner rather than later. I mean, the stuff that happened over the weekend with these this increasing volume of flights into Taiwan's airspace, everything that they've said explicitly about their intentions. I mean, they're not hiding this purpose. And so I think the single biggest foreign policy decision that any future American president is going to have to face is, are we going to fight China directly on behalf of Taiwan? And, I honestly have extremely mixed feelings about this, because, this is probably, I think The Economist was correct in saying that this is the single most dangerous point in the world at the present moment. And I think there are a lot of dodges. You could say, well, the Chinese aren't really serious about this, or you can say, well, we'll just support them, with arms and diplomatic support, but we won't actually fight. But my question to you is, do you think that it is worth it to us to actually send American men and women in harm's way in order to protect Taiwan?
Well, I don't have a yes or no answer to that. I think that Taiwan, I thought it was a tragedy what happened to Hong Kong, and China basically got away with it. And Taiwan is a different kind of asset to China than Hong Kong, and a very important strategic partner to us. When you think about the supply chain and chips and all the rest of it. So there's that. We have had this strategic ambiguity for years, and it's worked. And what's my preference is to keep that going. Will China make a bold move? I think that there are some constraints on China. China's economy is not very strong right now. There is, I think, well, let me start with that. So I think China would have to think very carefully about what the response would be. I also think we have to think very carefully. We've just extracted ourselves, perhaps messily, from a conflict in Afghanistan. I don't think we've had a debate in this country about whether America would be prepared for a war there. I don't think we've had that debate. And I don't think, again, we should make any decision like that without a debate. And I think Congress has to be in that debate. And there are many in Congress friendly to Taiwan, but I don't know that they are ready right now to say America should go to war to protect Taiwan. So I think I don't disagree with you that well, actually, I can think of one other, enormously, two other scary foreign policy friction points, but this is certainly one of them. The two others, by the way, are that Iran is months away from breakout. That means having enough nuclear enriched fuel to make a nuclear bomb. Whether it will make a bomb is unknown, but Israel is poised to prevent that from happening. Will we go to war to help our ally Israel? Israel's not asking us to do that, but there's that. And the second is the saber rattling from North Korea, which is now testing shorter range missiles, which has bombs. So let's understand that. And where that goes is also enormously fragile. So coming back to the question about allies, we need allies. We need a group of nations that are like-minded in trying to keep this world as peaceful as possible. If that sounds like a dodge, I don't mean it. I don't think there's any. I just don't know what the answer is to that, and I don't think we know enough. I mean, can I ask you? You're so thoughtful about this.
Yeah,
are you
well,
war over Taiwan?
As I said, I do not have a fixed opinion about this. I did a blog post a couple of months ago kind of reacting to Jim Stavridis's book 2034, where he actually tries to describe what a war would look like. And the one thing that I do think we could be doing that we're not doing is actually to have a much more detailed discussion of escalatory scenarios.
Yep.
During the Cold War, people, not ordinary Americans, but people that were professionally involved in foreign policy had a pretty good sense of what the military options were in a NATO Warsaw Pact war. And, you had a whole theory of extended deterrence in order to prevent escalation to a nuclear level and, so on and so forth. A lot of people were thinking about this. This doesn't exist remotely in East Asia. Even if you try to explain how a situation could spin out of control, there aren't these canonical scenarios like the Hamburg grab or, the stuff we did during the Cold War. And I just think that we need to start thinking about this stuff seriously. But I think for the reasons that neither you nor I were willing to give a clear answer to that question, people just don't want to think about it. They really don't. So they try not to take it seriously and just hope that we can sort of shove this question under the rug. But I think that it's going to happen. And when it happens, we don't want to be in a position of saying, well, okay, let's see. What are the ways that we could respond to this? I mean, that just isn't going to be an adequate response.
Well, hope is not a strategy. So I think we totally agree there. I'm not positive it's going to happen. I think that China is pushing toward it, but I think there could be effective deterrence if we are very thoughtful about how to do it. And I hope we are. And I don't think Congress is in the game in any thoughtful way yet and needs to be in the game. I mean, let's remember the history of some of the most stellar foreign policy, security policy strategists were members of the Senate and the House. And now, this blame the other side business model is not generating any thoughtful, any strategic and thoughtful responses from Congress. But you prompt me to think, Jeff, that you need to be thinking about this too. Maybe you are. Why don't we put you on the spot? Do you have a clear view of what you have, Jeff?
So I have a clear question for you and Frank, and we're in the last 5 minutes. The question to you two is, if there's aggression and China successfully absorbs Taiwan, apart from the moral tragedy, what do you imagine the strategic implication to be? We don't resist, China wins, Taiwan is absorbed. Frank?
Well, it's going to be horrible. I think that we withdrew from Afghanistan because Biden said that we needed to concentrate on the really big issues, which are Russia and China. And then we moved to China and then we don't do anything. That's, and the question is, when do we ever do anything about anything? And the answer will probably be never. But, there is a worse scenario where we could actually try to defend Taiwan and then we're defeated. And that's not so good either.
Right. And again, without the support of the American public. I mean, this is, we didn't have an adequate conversation about Afghanistan once we accomplished the mission authorized by Congress. And we spent 20 years doing things that at least I think were in much of a wrong direction at an enormous cost of both treasure and human life, not just our human life. And so we can't, it seems to me, do that again. We really need, I think this is an urgent topic that needs debate, not all in the public press or even on wonderful Zoom, but it needs enormous focus right now. And I couldn't agree more.
So we're almost out of time, Jane, and you all. Michelle High, our colleague managing editor, put in chat to me, Michelle, sorry, but for sake of time, I'm going to give voice to your question. It really rounds it off nicely and brings it back to the beginning of the conversation, Jane. Michelle was asking in chat to me, for you, for us, to what extent do internal divisions in the United States and polarization affect our ability to act as a nation abroad, especially when issues are so hard. I hope I did justice, Michelle. Jane, you want to react to that? And then we'd be eager for final words, please.
Well, the answer is it hurts our ability to act in the world enormously, because America is strongest when America projects ourselves in a light that few can do. And we're not doing that. What are we projecting at the moment? We're projecting these incredibly awful fights, like whether we should default on our debt for the first time in our history. And somebody pointed out, in fact, Eric Cantor, a former Republican leader in the House, the other day in an op-ed, that every time we've had that fight, it's been about fiscal responsibility. Do we really want to add more debt? And, oh dear, what did we do? And shouldn't we repeal some programs or whatever? This time we're not having the fight around that issue. We're having the fight around no issue. And it is, Russian roulette. And it's just terrifying. So the world is looking at us wondering, where did America go? And I think that makes it much harder for us to be heard. If we even can be heard around issues. We just talked about Taiwan. I don't know that America is ready to be heard on that issue. We have gone from toxic partisanship to toxic tribalism. Both parties have that, tribes, and the tribes are fighting the other tribes in the same party. And we just don't have the ability to function effectively. And I would give Joe Biden, whom I've known forever, he was a young congressman when I was working for a California senator named John Tunney, who served only one term, but I was, as I mentioned, his chief counsel and then his legislative director. Joe Biden has a lot of experience. He wants to think strategically. He's pulled together a team. You can appreciate some of them, maybe whatever. He's pulled together a team of people with experience. And I just have never seen a bigger need for strategy. And the point of my book, maybe these are my concluding remarks, is that the Cold War ended, we won, they lost, and we've had no strategy since. Over 4 presidents. I will name them: 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. Their names are Clinton, Bush 43, Obama, and Trump. And we've had tactical policies, and they don't always add up. And some have been fine, and some have been really bad. And Congress has played a shrinking role in all of it. And if ever there was a time for America to find our voice, which we have to find together, it is right now. And I want to think that the younger generation, I'm looking at Mike Fox, is going to have to bail us out a little bit here. My generation has not made a better world for your generation, Mike. My apologies, or the generations of my kids and grandkids. And I do think the way to get there from here is to try to find the way to listen to each other and the way to respect each other and to welcome back diverse voices, including some you totally disagree with. So what? You might actually learn something from listening to those voices, and to get out of our silos and get out of our echo chambers. And is this hard with, rampant social media? You bet it is. But are we capable of doing it? You bet we are. And so, Jeff, let me applaud you and this whole project you have, because it's, you do have diverse voices, and you do tackle tough issues. And let me applaud Frank Fukuyama too, for being one of the most interesting voices over, 100 years, like me, but at least 30 that I can remember. You're probably half my age or something, but anyway, whatever. Let me applaud you.
I wish.
What added to the discourse, and just say that we can't quit. We cannot drop out. We can't quit this effort to do better and make America better.
Thank you.
Well, that was a magnificent way, charming and stimulating and demanding to finish. So to everybody in this participant intensive roundtable American Purpose, read Insanity Defense, St. Martin's 2021, follow the work, the writing and the thinking of Jane Harman. Frank, thank you, and all of you making time. But Jane, what a pleasure. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon in
Yep.
person. Warmest thanks, Jane Harman.
Thank you all.
Thanks so
Take
much.
care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day, good evening.
Thank you.